What's going on, Canisius community? Andy Deyell back with another episode of Conversations with Canisius. I am joined today by Evan Ortolani from the class of 2007. Evan is the Chief Creative Officer and Vice President of one of the most beloved brands in Western New York, Ted's Hot Dogs. And Evan, welcome and thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Andy, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
It's going great. You know, Evan, I really enjoy every time we get together and talk. You know, I've known you now for a few years through our connection as, you know, you're a student at Elmwood Franklin School where I once worked, and obviously a student at Canisius High School. And we've had so many great conversations over the years. And one of the things that I love about my job, one of the things I love doing these interviews is you get to interview very successful people. And I often find the most interesting stories are those stories with people whose success has come not in a linear fashion like we're used to, but like through uncommon paths. And your journey is one that I just think is such a great story to share with our community, and an inspiring one for our alums and for our young students who are, you know, just starting to make their way in the world. So we're going to dive into all of that today in a condensed form, but we'll get through it all. But first and foremost, start off, just talk a little bit about, I love this title, Chief Creative Officer. What do you do for Ted's and that brand to elevate it?
Well, my background was in advertising. I was an art director and creative director in advertising. So in that role, your job is to come up with creative, which usually comes from a campaign. So while creating a campaign, you're responsible for everything from the big idea all the way down to the execution, which could be a script. I used to do TV. But I mean, throughout my role in advertising, you know, I got into guerrilla campaigns, big billboard campaigns, big TV campaigns, big online campaigns, digital marketing. Literally, I touched every facet of it. And I mean, we can kind of skip 15 years of things. And eventually, when I got back involved in Ted's, I had one foot in the water and one foot out. I was kind of in the family business and not in the family business. But I was very familiar with starting with a project or an idea and getting to the end of the tunnel and finishing it. So starting with an idea and executing to an actual physical product or whatever it was. So one of the things that I started off doing with Ted's is I partnered with one of my best friends who's a very successful architect. And I took that same ideation of this is how I do a project from start to finish, and I did it with a building. So throughout my career, I've done everything from advertising to social media to literally making a building, building signage. So a chief creative officer in my role right now is really being responsible for anything that the public is going to experience, from signage to campaign to food photography to what you sit on in the stores, what music is on. It's a true brand experience that I have to think about in these very small details, because I don't want anyone coming into a restaurant and be thrown off by anything. So I want everything to be intuitive. I want everything to seem effortless. I want it to be simple. I want it to be beautiful. I want it to be classic. And kind of when you're the chief creative officer, you need to take this giant cloud of all of these very important things and be able to put it through that filter for every decision. So if we have a print campaign, everything's got to go through that filter. If we have a video campaign, everything needs to go through that filter. Classic, authentic, cool, look, feel, color, who the audience is. And the same thing now that I'm really doing is building a business for, you know, how does the employee look? What are they wearing? How do the stores look? What do you feel? What's the music? So truly, Chief Creative Officer is kind of being responsible for everything that is a visual brand of a business. And it can really, it can be a lot sometimes, but it's fun.
And it's been a really interesting journey for you to get back to sort of this point, and maybe not the way you planned it, right? So take us back in time a little bit to the beginning of your interesting journey at Canisius High School and what Canisius was like for you and then sort of what propelled you, after Canisius to get into, college and your journeys through New York, East Coast and West Coast. And take us through that journey where starting at Canisius and get us up to where you are today.
Yeah, well, Canisius was, I had a blast at Canisius. And the best part about Canisius is Canisius was very honest with me. Like Canisius never lied to me. So I always knew where I stood. I wasn't a great student. I was far, far, far from a good student. And Canisius was not shy to tell me that I was not in a good position. So starting off at Canisius, I didn't know how I could excel because my brain didn't work like that. All my other classmates knew how to do it. I tried tutoring. I was a really good active member of Canisius where I played all the sports. So I knew that you had to practice very hard to make the team. You had to be a leader to be a captain. Like you had to win games to get to that big game where the whole school's cheering for you. Like I knew what hard work got you, but only in a couple small avenues. School, I was awful. I just didn't know how to figure out that puzzle. But I was smart enough that I knew what I might have to do. So it started where my junior year, I knew that my grades weren't great. And if I was going to get into the college that I wanted to get into, which was Pratt Institute, it was an art school. I knew that I wanted to be an artist, but I didn't know how. I always had the talent, but I had no idea what outlet that was because I was very busy with, again, being like an active student at Canisius, having really good friends, like playing on awesome teams and, doing high school kid stuff, like having fun. Sure. So I went to this thing called the pre-college program that I saw would give you college credit. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like I can start getting college credits towards a school that I want to get to. Maybe this would help me. It's going to help me build a portfolio. Unfortunately, at that time, Canisius's art program wasn't wildly strong. So I was in the dark. I was in like this very dark tunnel with no grades for it, but having a lot of fun. So I had some Disney stock from my grandfather years ago. I sold that, put myself to New York for the summer, built a portfolio, did really well, got, a 4.0 in my grade system, realized that fell in love with Brooklyn, fell in love with New York, knew that I was in the right place. I was getting good grades. We had a show, we had a thesis where I was confident, I knew what I was talking about. So I'm like, okay, boom, chest beating situation. Went back to Canisius, senior year. Awesome. Everyone's getting ready for college. I'm still having fun. I'm not really being intelligent enough to be aware of my grades and how they were really going to affect me. Canisius was trying to be like, hey man, you need to push this. And I'm like, no, I always find my way out of it. I have a good personality. I can get that extra credit. I can have a really good relationship with my teacher to pass just enough or whatever. Sure enough, come college time, I applied to all these colleges. I had a portfolio that I thought was good. I was talented. Not the most talented person, but I was talented. And I got rejected from everywhere. All my safeties, everything. And I'm like, oh my God, of course this would happen. Even Pratt. So spent my own money to get into this pre-college program, didn't help, didn't care. They're like, that was the first time where I'm like, there's a million of me. And there's that out of that million, there's thousands and thousands who have tried a little bit harder in that grade situation that they're going to choose from. So I'm like, you're an idiot. You screwed up. But I got one letter, and it was one acceptance letter. And it was for a school that I really wanted to go to for computer animation. So it was this down in Florida. It was called Ringling College of Art and Design. So I was like, okay, here we go. Got it. That's my foot in the door. And this is kind of a reoccurring thing where I've had multiple foot in the door situations. And this was the first one that I didn't even realize that this is kind of what kept me going in life. And this is really, if I'm going to talk to a younger kid or whatever, I'm like, if you get a foot in the door, that's it. If you fail, it's on you. All you need is that one foot. So I got that foot in the door, nailed it. 4.0, killed it, did outrageously well. I did realize that computer animation wasn't for me because it wasn't what I thought it was, which that thing that I thought it was is what I ended up in the role I eventually got to, which is directing. So anyways, transferred to Pratt, which I could now. So I got a scholarship to Pratt because I busted my butt down in Florida. So now I'm in Brooklyn. I'm back where I wanted to be. Took me a year, took me some money and a bunch of, kicking myself, but I got there. That foot in the door got me back to that place where I wanted to go.
Well, and you had every opportunity maybe to be discouraged, but you didn't.
100%. If I wouldn't have got the grades that I got and increased my portfolio the way I did, number one, I couldn't have afforded it because at this time, TEDS was not a part of my family situation. I was completely on my own. I had zero tie to TEDS, and that was that. So I was just like, I was trying to make a career for myself. Got to Brooklyn, and I had to start over. So I'm like, okay, they didn't take any of my credits. Another very discouraging thing where I'm like, okay, what I thought was going to be, it's 5 years. It's going to decline this call here.
Say that again, Evan. When your phone came out, your audio.
Sorry about that.
Right.
I was just discouraged again.
Sure.
What I thought was going to be 4 years of school was turning into 5. And I'm like, oh man, I'm already behind. But whatever. In New York, and I know that I have to do what I just did again, which is have a very, art school is hard. Like it's you're working till 4 a.m. on projects and you're putting things up every time and you're getting critiqued by your classmates, and your teachers are going to tear what you just worked on all night, all week. They're going to tear it off the wall and tell you that it's crap. And that's the best thing that I learned in art school, which is like, you need a thick skin because you got to get told when you're not, utilizing yourself to the best potential. So art school really tore me down, but it was 4 years. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I thought it was graphic design. I was in New York. I was really into, Milton Glaser, like these big graphic designers. The internet wasn't like a thing. So knowing who was cool and who was doing certain things, like it wasn't around. So I wasn't really sure what was cool about the art world or where I wanted to be. So again, I'm in the dark in New York alone. I didn't have any family members or people close to me to like help get guided in like this artistic field. Eventually throughout the 4 years, I found myself falling in. I had this really awesome professor who was a chief creative officer. He was in advertising. He's like, so that's when I found out that advertising is art. It's artwork, but it has to be smart and conceptual. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is like, now my head is clicking, because I always had this like artistic rebel side in me, but that Canisius side of me, which was like, I'm a gentleman, I'm gracious, I'm kind, I know how to shake someone in the hand. My classmates around me are all like entrepreneurial. Like for the first time, art and business crossed. And I was like, boom, I'm like, that makes sense to me, because I didn't want to be an artist who was just a poor artist who didn't know how to put his like best foot forward and have someone come up and say like, hey, how did you do this? Or what do you do? Or how did you get this successful? Like I wanted to be successful. I wanted my own like business or entity or something. So this was that thing where I was like, boom, you can make money, you can travel, you can make art, but it can be smart, and you can be in this, it can be film, it can be print, it can be any of these things, which I saw was just like artwork. So that's when I switched my major to advertising. And then, worked hard my senior year, and at Pratt, they have a senior show. So like, I don't know, like 10% of the kids get into the senior show. So there's a big thesis crit at the end of the year where everyone hangs up their work, and then all the staff go around and they pick the best of each student. And then they have those kids have their own show in Manhattan, and then they invite all the professionals to that. And that's where like the kids get recruited from. So I got into that. which was very important because the kids who didn't get into that didn't get that first job, that good first job that puts you into that category of, I'm ahead of the curve, I'm doing cool work, and how do I do that work? I'm not sure if this makes any sense, but whatever. Got into the show, got picked up by a really cool, like one of the biggest advertising agencies. It was called Deutsch. They were doing all my favorite work, like the Call of Duty stuff, like these crazy, cool, funny ads where I was like, this is the coolest. I'm like, that's exactly what I want to do. They had scooters in the office. It was in Manhattan. And I was like, boom, I'm off to the races. Actually, you want to know what? Before that, I got my first internship, which I thought was going to be my dream job. So before that, I still had this, a little bit of a Buffalo mentality in me where I knew sports really well. I loved hockey. And that's that field that I was like, if I'm going to be in graphic design or advertising, there was this old campaign called History Will Be Made. So I knew that from growing up in Buffalo. I'm like, that's a cool commercial. I want to do that. Junior year of college, I got an internship at the NHL. And I'm like, boom, nailed it. Like, this is what I want to do. I got to the NHL and it was really corporate. It was nothing wrong with the corporate world, but I was a creative. I wanted that like weird creative energy. And it was suit, tie, like just a corporate environment. I was just like kind of scratching my head a little bit. And I asked the small creative team there, I'm like, who made the History Will Be Made campaign? And they're like, oh, we don't do that. An advertising agency does that. And I'm just like, oh my God, like I'm in the wrong place. So then that is when I switched my major to advertising and art direction to get me into the advertising campaign. So then I went into my senior year to work towards building an advertising campaign as like my senior project and stuff like that, which got me into Deutsch. And then from Deutsch, I went to, I got picked up by the #1 agency in the world at that time, which was Gray, as a freelancer. It was really hard to get a job. So I was freelancing, like you had to prove yourself to get picked up as a full-time art director. So I went to Gray, nervous as all can be, had zero experience, loved Deutsch, but I quickly found out that Deutsch wasn't where I wanted to be. Got to Gray, I'm like, this place is killer. This place is like dream world. I'm on 23rd and 5th Ave in one of the coolest offices in Manhattan, working with Tor Mayern, who's now the president of communications at Apple. It's like Tim Cook and Tor. He was my first boss. So I, again, through this like weird personality that I've kind of evolved to be from that Canisius of like, how do I get into the better situation? Like, I know I'm not doing my best. I see the best. Like, how do I get there? I didn't have a full-time job at Gray, but I knew that they had this thing called the Gray Global Communal Council, which was like you could take any of their clients, make a spec ad and submit it to the chief creative officer, Tor, and like the CEO and the board, and they'd review it. And if they liked it enough, they would push it to make a real ad to win awards, because in advertising, the more awards you have, the cooler you are, the cooler work you do. And this, they had NFL, they had Dos Equis, they were doing the coolest stuff in advertising.
And what was your favorite of all the roles you've had in advertising? Which was your favorite one?
My favorite role, I got to work with my best friend, who was my writer, as a senior art director, where you're right in that middle category of I'm writing, creating, shooting, editing, and finishing an amazing campaign. So you're basically doing Hollywood budget stuff and having a lot of fun doing it, while your bosses are dealing with the headaches of the clients and and all of the nitty gritty that comes with advertising, because there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. So that right in that middle category of senior art director, when I was working with my best friend, was probably my favorite time But anyways, I'll jump back to this real fast. This is way too long of a story, but I submitted an ad that I made in school that I loved. And it was this 3M ad. And I worked really hard late at night, remade it, came up with a couple other ideas, put it in this pile. And sure enough, what I thought would never be seen by anyone was seen. So I was in my desk and Tor walks by and he's like, "Why is that up on your screen?" He had no idea who I was. I didn't know him at the time. And he's like, "Why is that up on your screen?" I'm like, "Oh, I made it. I'm just like putting this up on my portfolio site." He's like, "You come with me." He loved it, picked me up, gave me a full-time job. Boom. I'm like working with Tor, making an awesome ad right away. So that put me at the head of the line at this like #1 advertising agency, which got me in the position of working on those video campaigns where most people really want to work on, but if you're not doing them at a young age, then it's hard to prove yourself that you can take those bigger, campaigns and stuff, because you got to sell them. Anyways, I sold to just continue this journey because it's long. After that, I sold my first video campaign, and I didn't know what that was. So it was a gun control ad. Me and my partner, not my best friend at this time, we wrote it, sold it. It was awesome. And I was like, okay, if I'm the art director on this, I'm going to storyboard it. I'm going to come up with a mood board. And I was really excited. So I came up with this big packet, this big presentation of how I saw the commercial from start to finish, where it opened, where it cut to, what was it animated? Was it shot? Whatever. And I gave it to my boss, who was a creative director at the time. And he's like, "No, you don't do this. The director does this." And I'm just like, oh my God, I'm in the wrong place. So I was in the wrong place again, but not in a bad way, like loving it, like killing it. But what I'm slowly finding out is I want to be a director, not an art director, not a, creative director. I want to be a director of film, because I could never really read. I could never really comprehend long dialogue, long text, until I read my first script. And the script is, description, dialogue, description. So my head, for the first time with words, it could paint that picture and I could follow it because it was rhythmic. And before you knew it, I finished the script. I'm like, oh my God, I just read. Like, I could never read, which sounds crazy, but I really never wanted to, because it was never fun for me. I'd have to read the same page 5-6 times and I wouldn't even get it. So now I'm like, I can write scripts, I can read scripts, I'm funny. This is what I can do. My best friend at the time, he was a writer, much better writer than I am, which again, like, very smart thing to realize in this world is like, know what you're not good at, connect with someone who is better than you. He's an amazing writer. I'm good, but 100% better. So we teamed up, and it was to get me to that next job. And as soon as we teamed up, it was like we were off to the races. And I was still doing advertising. In the back of my head, I wanted to be a director. So I was in New York. So I knew I had to take acting classes, take improv classes, be on an improv team. I took screenwriting classes, film classes, directing classes. These are all at 7, 8 o'clock at night that I found out that my company would pay for, because it's furthering my creative, brain, even though that I was doing it to get me out of the world that I was in. So during this time, this took 6 years of me, shooting something by myself, editing something by myself. And in this time, I got this wild knowledge of film from this job that I thought that I wanted to be out of. So I became really good friends with top editors, top sound designers, top directors of photography, got to know exactly how a film set worked, what directors I like, what directors I don't like. And eventually advertising, kicked my butt enough where I was burnt out. And I did some really great stuff, worked on some really big campaigns, had a lot of fun doing it, made it funny, made it cool, made it wacky, made sure that if I did work, it was my personality, because people can really shoot themselves in the foot when they don't do that. Because when I was first working at Gray, I was working on Smuckers and Choosy Moms Choose Jif. I did not want to write Choosy Moms Choose Jif commercials. I wanted to write the wacky stuff, the Sour Patch Kids commercials, the crazy toothpaste, the stuff that I was like, the FedEx commercials, like the awesome stuff. That's what I wanted to do. So I wouldn't surround myself with that group. I surrounded myself with the comedy group because I knew that I wanted to get into comedy. And that's why I paired up with Nick, because he was a comedy writer, which slowly got me into this world of like, now if I'm going to do a commercial or an ad, it's going to be my personality type. So I'm going to have fun every time I do something. The people who didn't think like that got trapped in this world of once you do a couple Choosy Moms Choose Jif commercials, now you're in that category. Sure. So you really have to like pick your battles and know, and it can be discouraging. But luckily, you know, I had this weird, you know, kind of very confident personality where I'm just always going in the right direction that I wanted to. So anyways, advertising burned me out. And I really was in love with this guy, Casey Neistat at the time. He was like a vlogger on YouTube. He was making ads. He was an assistant to one of my favorite artists, Tom Sachs. So he had this really cool style, and I would watch all of his stuff. And I always like kind of manifested my life where if I wanted something, I would write it down. I would dissect it. I would draw it out. I would try and create it. I would try and recreate it. If it would be, you know, the smallest version of what I wanted, it still like move me in that direction. So Casey Neistat had this studio in Manhattan and had his own little cool business as an artist. And I'm like, that's what I want. So I quit my job with zero intention of knowing what to do next. And during those like 6 years of work, I did some freelance work for these guys out in Los Angeles. The day after I quit my job, they really liked working with me. And like, to bring it back to that Canisius mentality, like me and my partner would always say, like, you just have to be smart, fast, and nice. And if you're those things, you're going to get jobs all the time. And they're going to be good ones. Smart, fast, good, nice. So I always made sure that that's how I presented myself as a professional. And if you do, people are always going to come back to you. So sure enough, this cool startup out of Los Angeles, they came back to me. They're like, hey man, we have some work to do. Are you interested? I'm like, well, I just quit my job, so yeah. And they're like, yeah, we need this, that, the other. And part of that was a video campaign. I'm like, hey, I can do that. And me knowing that this is my first directing gig. So I'm going to say yes to everything. If I have no idea how to do it, I don't care. I need to be a director, because it's very hard to cut your teeth as a director. Everybody wants to do it because it's like that glamour job, but it's the hardest job to have. Not easy. I took it. I had no idea what I was doing. They flew me out to LA the next day. I said yes to everything. And it took me on a month-and-a-half journey in a Winnebago with a small skeleton crew, cruising around the United States, filming my first video campaign, working with those old directors, old editors that I used to have contact with, doing favors for me with zero money, zero insurance. Dumb looking back on it. I don't know how I survived this, but at the end of it, I had a campaign that looked similar to what I did as a $4 million job, and I did it with like 50 grand. And I'm like, I can do this. So I had this crazy confidence. I'm like, I can do this again and again and again. And I felt like King Kong. So I'm back in New York, and this studio pops up on Craigslist. I'm like, I'm going to go look at this. Like, I saved away some money because I was smart. I always saved money. I always made sure, because I wanted my own business. And it was time for me to use that money. I was like, I'll put this towards a studio, and I'm going to start my own advertising agency. Like, but I'm going to be the director. So I'm cutting out the middleman, and I'm just going to do things for cheaper. And I'm going to work directly with the brand, because I'm like this, weirdly enough, Canisius man of others person who is polite, gracious, hardworking, and all these other things that people really responded to. I'm like, oh, I can do this all day long. And I have this crazy experience of brand and film. So I went and looked at this studio, and sure enough, it was Casey Neistat's building. The studio was right above Casey's studio. So this thing that I dreamt of put me exactly above this guy that I wanted to be. And from there, I was in Tribeca. I left the advertising world, and I was doing it completely alone. And it was an amazing feeling, and the hardest, most challenging part of my life. But I had so much fun. All the work that I did and the people I worked with was not only for me, but I wouldn't work with another person unless they wanted it. So if I was working with a colorist, and that's someone who would finish the final look of the film that you're shooting, if I did an outdoor film, that guy that I worked with or girl that I worked with, they were looking for a piece in their portfolio that was an outdoor piece. So they would get something, I would also get something. So I would never work with anybody who wasn't having fun with the project. And it put me in contact with a bunch of really awesome people. I did a bunch of really cool stuff. And that eventually led me to slowly getting back to Buffalo. Is at the end of that journey, there was some family conflict where I had to come back and help out with family business. So as much as I was loving that situation of my own business in Manhattan, it was really hard. I was, just a poor director trying to make it, but it was fun. But it was time for me to come back home and help out the family. And that's exactly what I did. And during that time, I still wanted to be back in New York. I still wanted to continue to do my thing, but my eyes were opening up a little bit more to be like, if the story was told correctly, this is exactly where I should be. This is an old brand. I've only worked on brand. This is an old classic brand that is awesome, that has an amazing community, an amazing look, an amazing feel. Like, I could be responsible for this. At the same time, have this entrepreneurial spirit and build it into something that I always wanted, which is I always wanted my own business. That's why I started my own thing. And I was hesitant to get involved in the business because, again, when I didn't have any tie to the family business, I like working for what I have. I always like knowing that people know that I have worked for everything that I have got. That's just the type of person I am. I really believe in hard work. And it eventually led me to where we are now, which is taking all those experiences of starting with an idea and finishing to doing that with TEDS. And it's been like this outrageously fun journey of now I'm doing it with industrial designers to make custom booths and benches. And he's a really good friend of mine. I'm doing it with architects, and I'm thinking, I'm working with original neon sign makers. I'm not, working with outdoor landscape artists. The entire world of the brand, it's almost like I get to make a set, which is the way I'm kind of looking at it, which is I get to make a movie that doesn't go away. So if you walk into any of these places and you take a picture, I want it to feel like what I used to design of a beautiful film. So I'm just starting this journey now, and it's this weird serendipitous life event thing of, I don't know why I got into advertising. I don't know why I have the experiences I have. I don't know why I'm, so involved in design and intuitive thinking and business, but the position that I'm in now is kind of perfect because it's creating a business from scratch, but recreating 100 years of history. So it's very challenging, but wildly hard.
Your experiences, right? heretofore. You're using all of the experiences that you have for this one thing. It's almost like it's a perfect, like, synergy of circumstances.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. It's really a perfect, a perfect match made in heaven. I'm having a lot of fun with it. So
When
it's,
you look back like at your time at Canisius, and then on all of your experiences up to now, I would imagine you'd have tons of great advice for kids, and for young people who are just, finishing up high school, moving on to college, starting to work in the world. So if you could think of, like, two or three things you would pass on, pieces of advice from your experiences, things that helped you, what would you tell young people?
yeah. Well, I mean, I would definitely tell them it is not how smart you are. It is not how smart you are. It's about how much work you put in, period. And that is really important to remember, because if you do something every day that you have no idea how to do, you're going to get good at it. That's just the way humans are. We're awesome human beings. So practice makes perfect. Remember that. It works in every category of the world. It's not about how smart you are. It's about how much work you put in. Let me tell you, I was the worst student in the world. I was seen as stupid, as a very stupid kid. But throughout just being strong enough to know that you wanted to work, you can get whatever you want. I mean, that would be number one. Number two, if you want something, if you're lucky enough to know what you want, which is hard, but if you're lucky enough to know what you want, and that might not come until after college, very similar to me, that didn't come until after college. You need to surround yourself with the people and the places that you want. Like, if you don't surround yourself with the people and if you don't surround yourself in the world that you want to be in, you're just not going to get there. You really need to immerse yourself and see yourself as that member of that community before you even are. And if you do that, your friends, your environment are all going to become so true to who you are that you're just going to have an amazing amount of confidence of saying, I'm here for me, and these people around me are all like-minded people trying to move in the same direction. Let's see. I mean, I think also knowing, like, if you feel like you're in the wrong place, that is so normal. Like, I can't, like, that first story that I told you, I've been in the wrong place a million different times, but you need to be strong enough to move past those. So being in the wrong place is completely normal. Failing, completely normal. It's just about just learning and moving on. And I also wrote down something where, when you're doing that, like, it's good to make new friends. But by me saying that, it's not throwing your old friends in the trash. It's not saying I'm better than you. It's not saying anything like that. Those people you grew up with, like, they're going to love you no matter what. Like, they want to see you grow. Like, they want to see you succeed. So trying to find a new group because you're growing is good. Like, find a new group, try to create yourself. Like, you can create a new version of yourself as you get older. And it's very normal. I feel like a lot of people are afraid to step away from the things that they loved, and afraid to start new chapters because it's so comfortable. And I get it. I mean, if you're comfortable and you don't want to move on, then don't, because everyone's different. But if you do want, like I said, if you're lucky enough to kind of know those next steps that you want, or know that dream job, or know that person you want to be, or know that maybe you want to give a TED talk one day, like, that's me. Like, I want to give a TED talk one day, but I'm not there yet. I have a lot of experience, but I'm still not there yet. And it's just knowing that it's okay to move past where you were.
Yeah, well, that's great advice, and it's also a great segue to sort of our last topic, and that is just the future. We've talked a lot about the past here, but tell me a little bit about your goals. Not only for Ted's as you've come back, to help take over the family business, but goals for you personally as you look at, into the near and further term future. Does the future have in store for Evan Ortolani?
Oh man,
Or what would you like to have in store aside from getting?
no, I have. It's tough because I'm a creator. I I need to be creating. I'm similar to a shark where if I'm not moving very fast and a lot of things aren't happening to me, and I don't have a lot of energy around me, I feel like I'm dead. So this journey right now of trying to make this business the best it can be, both for the community, for our employees, for the stores that we build, everything is a wild journey that I know is going to take some time. So I see myself definitely wanting to make that the best it can be. But at the same time, also trying to keep true to everything that we just talked about, that I may be talking to you in 20 years saying I was in the wrong place.
Yeah.
And that's okay, because I don't know where I will be in 20 years. Maybe I'm going to take a piece of learning how to grow a business and do it for a completely different thing after I have this business kind of running itself. Maybe I fall in love with this business more than I ever thought I would, and I become something that I thought that I never would, which is, also okay. But me as a person, as long as I'm achieving the goals that I set out for myself, I'm good. As long as I'm working, I'm good. As long as I'm challenging myself, I'm really good. I taught a couple art classes to kids, and I have a sketchbook, and I tell them, the kids, when there's adults in the room, I tell them that it's magic. And I'm like, everything I draw in this book comes to life. And they're like, whoa, 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 that's so cool. That's so cool. And the parents are all just like, haha, this kid, what's he talking about? And then I break it down. I'm like, no, everything that I have drawn, written, or planned in this book has come to life, whether it's, thumbnails of a script in a film that I made, whether it's a set, whether it's an idea, whether it's a business, everything. I'm a maker. The only thing I want to make sure I keep doing is putting things down in that notebook, staying true to that spirited man mentality where I don't lose that rebellious artistic kid in me, where I think this book is magic. If I write it down, I can go get it. If I visualize myself in this art studio above Casey Neistat, I can be there. If I want, whatever it might be, I don't know what that next thing I draw in that book's going to be, but I want it to be exciting. I want it to challenge me, and I want it to take me to places where I would usually never be, because if I'm not learning and growing, then I'm not a fun person to be around. I'll say that.
Well, thank you for sharing so much of your story with us today. I look forward to hearing about all the next chapters. I know there'll be probably several. I think your story is inspirational. I really think our community is really going to like to hear it, Evan. So thank you for spending so much time with us today. Let's stay in touch, and can't wait to hear about what's next. Thanks, man.
Yeah, you got it, Andy. Thanks so much for having me. And Canisius boys, keep working, keep striving, and the world's your oyster. It's crazy. All you got to do is just put yourself in the right place at the right time with the right spirit, and anything can happen. It's truly energy. Just if you have good energy and a good spirit, life is easy.
Well said. Thanks, buddy. It's great to see you.
Hey, Andy, thanks so much, man. Have a good one, huh?
You as well.
Bye.